The Battle of Waterloo was fought on the 18th of June, 1815. I do not state this fact as a reminder to the reader, but as news to him, for a forgotten fact is news when it comes again. Writers of books have the fashion of whizzing by vast and renowned historical events with the remark, "The details of this tremendous episode are too familiar to the reader to need repeating here." They know that that is not true. It is a low kind of flattery. They know that the reader has forgotten every detail of it, and that nothing of the tremendous event is left in his mind but a vague and formless luminous smudge. Aside from the desire to flatter the reader, they have another reason for making the remark, two reasons, indeed. They do not remember the details themselves, and do not want the trouble of hunting them up and copying them out. Also, they are afraid that if they search them out and print them, they will be scoffed at by the book reviewers for retelling those worn old things which are familiar to everybody. They should not mind the reviewer's jeer. He doesn't remember any of the worn old things until the book which he is reviewing has retold them to him. I have made the quoted remark myself, at one time and another, but I was not doing it to flatter the reader. I was merely doing it to save work. If I had known the details without brushing up, I would have put them in. But I didn't, and I did not want the labor of posting myself. So I said, "The details of this tremendous episode are too familiar to the reader to need repeating here." I do not like that kind of a lie. Still, it does save work. I am not trying to get out of repeating the details of the siege of Lucknow in fear of the reviewer. I am not leaving them out in fear that they would not interest the reader. I am leaving them out partly to save work, mainly for lack of room. It is a pity, too, for there is not a dull place anywhere in the great story. 10 days before the outbreak, May 10th, of the mutiny, all was serene at Lucknow, the huge capital of Oudh, the kingdom which had recently been seized by the India Company. There was a great garrison composed of about 7,000 native troops and between 700 and 800 whites. These white soldiers and their families were probably the only people of their race there. At their elbow was that swarming population of warlike natives, a race of born soldiers, brave, daring, and fond of fighting. On high ground just outside the city stood the palace of that great personage, the Resident, the representative of British power and authority. It stood in the midst of spacious grounds, with its due complement of outbuildings, and the grounds were enclosed by a wall not for defense, but for privacy. The mutinous spirit was in the air, but the whites were not afraid, and did not feel much troubled. Then came the outbreak at Meerut, then the capture of Delhi by the mutineers. In June came the 3 weeks' leaguer of Sir Hugh Wheeler in his open lot at Cawnpore, 40 miles distant from Lucknow. Then the treacherous massacre of that gallant little garrison, and now the great revolt was in full flower, and the comfortable condition of things at Lucknow was instantly changed. There was an outbreak there, and Sir Henry Lawrence marched out of the Residency on the 30th of June to put it down, but was defeated with heavy loss, and had difficulty in getting back again. That night the memorable siege of the Residency, called the Siege of Lucknow, began. Sir Henry was killed 3 days later, and Brigadier Inglis succeeded him in command. Outside of the Residency fence was an immense host of hostile and confident native besiegers. Inside it were 480 loyal native soldiers, 730 white ones, and 500 women and children. In those days the English garrisons always managed to hamper themselves sufficiently with women and children. The natives established themselves in houses close at hand, and began to rain bullets and cannon balls into the Residency, and this they kept up night and day during 4 months and a half, the little garrison industriously replying all the time. The women and children soon became so used to the roar of the guns that it ceased to disturb their sleep. The children imitated siege and defense in their play. The women, with any pretext, or with none, would sally out into the storm-swept grounds. The defense was kept up week after week, with stubborn fortitude, in the midst of death, which came in many forms, by bullet, smallpox, cholera, and by various diseases induced by unpalatable and insufficient food, by the long hours of wearying and exhausting overwork in the daily and nightly battle in the oppressive Indian heat, and by the broken rest caused by the intolerable pest of mosquitoes, flies, mice, rats, and fleas. 6 weeks after the beginning of the siege, more than one-half of the original force of white soldiers was dead, and close upon three-fifths of the original native force. But the fighting went on just the same. The enemy mined, the English countermined, and, turnabout, they blew up each other's posts. The Residency grounds were honeycombed with the enemy's tunnels. Deadly courtesies were constantly exchanged, sorties by the English in the night, rushes by the enemy in the night, rushes whose purpose was to breach the walls or scale them, rushes which cost heavily and always failed. The ladies got used to all the horrors of war, the shrieks of mutilated men, the sight of blood and death. Lady Inglis makes this mention in her diary: "Mrs. Brewer's nurse was carried past our door to-day, wounded in the eye. To extract the bullet it was found necessary to take out the eye, a fearful operation. Her mistress held her while it was performed." The first relieving force failed to relieve. It was under Havelock and Outram, and arrived when the siege had been going on for 3 months. It fought its desperate way to Lucknow, then fought its way through the city against odds of 100 to 1, and entered the Residency. But there was not enough left of it then to do any good. It lost more men in its last fight than it found in the Residency when it got in. It became captive itself. The fighting and starving and dying by bullets and disease went steadily on. Both sides fought with energy and industry. Captain Birch puts this striking incident in evidence. He is speaking of the 3rd month of the siege. "As an instance of the heavy firing brought to bear on our position this month may be mentioned the cutting down of the upper story of a brick building simply by musketry firing. This building was in a most exposed position. All the shots which just missed the top of the rampart cut into the dead wall pretty much in a straight line, and at length cut right through and brought the upper story tumbling down. The upper structure on the top of the brigade mess also fell in. The Residency house was a wreck. Captain Anderson's post had long ago been knocked down, and Innes's post also fell in. These two were riddled with round shot. As many as 200 were picked up by Colonel Masters." The exhausted garrison fought doggedly on all through the next month, October. Then, November 2nd, news came Sir Colin Campbell's relieving force would soon be on its way from Cawnpore. On the 12th the boom of his guns was heard. On the 13th the sounds came nearer. He was slowly but steadily cutting his way through, storming one stronghold after another. On the 14th he captured the Martiniere College and ran up the British flag there. It was seen from the Residency. Next he took the Dilkusha. On the 17th he took the former mess house of the 32nd Regiment, a fortified building and very strong. "A most exciting, anxious day," writes Lady Inglis in her diary. "About 4 p.m. 2 strange officers walked through our yard, leading their horses." And by that sign she knew that communication was established between the forces, that the relief was real this time, and that the long siege of Lucknow was ended. The last 8 or 10 miles of Sir Colin Campbell's march was through seas of blood. The weapon mainly used was the bayonet. The fighting was desperate. The way was milestoned with detached strong buildings of stone, fortified and heavily garrisoned, and these had to be taken by assault. Neither side asked for quarter, and neither gave it. At the Secundrabad, where nearly 2,000 of the enemy occupied a great stone house in a garden, the work of slaughter was continued until every man was killed. That is a sample of the character of that devastating march. There were but few trees in the plain at that time, and from the Residency the progress of the march, step by step, victory by victory, could be noted. The ascending clouds of battle smoke marked the way to the eye, and the thunder of the guns marked it to the ear. Sir Colin Campbell had not come to Lucknow